Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Okay, now our third and final item, on a less contentious note, perhaps, is based on a study of 20,000 e-commerce keywords that Kevin Indig did. He's the former Shopify SEO director, as in was just laid off this week, unfortunately. Kevin is a very knowledgeable, good person, often writing a lot of helpful content, and hopefully we'll have him as a guest on this podcast. Just I'll quickly summarize kind of the highest level findings. There's a lot of it. We wrote about it in the newsletter on Wednesday. There's a lot of good information in there. Couldn't reproduce it, but just kind of captured some of the highlights. So he identifies four major trends in commerce SERPs, and this is purely for the desktop. He's clear that he's not talking about mobile SERPs, although some of the features obviously overlap. One of them is that we're seeing a lot more visual information in commerce SERPs. That's no surprise to anybody who's paying attention. Google is putting many more SERP features in results that it considers to have ambiguous queries. He also identifies that in 77% of cases, Google is showing a local pack for e-commerce searches, which is very interesting, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then, to get maximum visibility as a retailer or product seller, you ultimately have to spend money with Google because ads are very prevalent in the vast majority of cases. In 84% cases, for example, product listing ads appear, and there are multiple ad types that are showing up in these commerce SERPs. But
also they're very visual, right? All of these commercial query ads are very, very visual.
Right. And they're much more valuable in some sense than other kinds of ads for services. It's interesting because, when you're looking for a product and you see that product represented and other information about the product and whether it's in store or not, that's actually a much more helpful ad unit, as Google is sort of fond of saying, its content, versus some of the service ads that you see or some of the ads you see on other kinds of queries, which are communicate less information and maybe, dubious in some other way.
The reality is there's no marketing in a PLA, right? It's an image, it's a price,
right.
Is it available, it's reviews. So there's no sort of self-marketing on the part of either the seller or the product manufacturer in a PLA.
That's right. So, and it's worth pointing out that one of the categories where Google got a big spending boost in its Q2 results was retail. So that retail and travel were apparently the two really most helpful categories where there was a lot of spending, and in retail you would assume that a lot of those are product ads, product PLAs. But so back to this point that local packs are being shown for 77% of e-commerce queries, which is really interesting. That would have been something totally unexpected and counterintuitive a few years ago, because those commerce queries would have been about driving people to e-commerce sites to buy something online. But of course, Google has dramatically changed that with its kind of agnostic or hybrid online-offline commerce strategy. So,
and Kevin rightly points out something we've been highlighting for as long as this podcast has been going, that this is Google's competitive advantage against Amazon is the fact that they can deliver places that you can go and buy something in 10 minutes that Amazon just can't do. And so it's a way for Google to try to move whatever the current number is, 53% of product searches that start at Amazon, to try to start to move those back to Google.
And it's also when we've talked a lot about the confusing Google results with all these different elements in it, and product search is one of the most diverse from an element point of view, local and PLAs and images in organic and Etsy boxes and all sorts of different units. So it's both, it's confusing, but it's also a way for Google to disambiguate and to train users that there is local inventory, because I assume product searches are a big category of searches at Google, even though they don't have the majority of them.
Well, and it's certainly an area of strategic emphasis for the reasons that David talked about, in trying to sort of claw back some of that, query volume from Amazon. And my interpretation is that this strategy is working for Google. They're having success, although it's not clear that they're getting market share back from Amazon, but they're clearly drawing advertising revenue to them with all the effort that they're putting into product search.
Well, as I've mentioned previously, they've at least clawed back some of my Amazon usage. I think Google Shopping is a very good user experience, and I do appreciate the fact I can see inventory from several dozen retailers whose names I actually recognize. Greg, you've brought this up previously, that the Amazon results are largely, sort of fly-by-night third-party sellers these days. And I think that it theoretically, Google Shopping is a potential competitive advantage, even setting aside the advantage of showing merchants with in-store inventory and not just a pure e-commerce experience. So I think that they've done a nice job with the shopping piece of Google, and I don't necessarily think they've done such a good job with disambiguation, but they've certainly, again, just speaking totally anecdotally, I will now default to the shopping tab if I am doing a search that I may not have realized was a sort of more transactional query. I will actually click the shopping tab underneath the search bar and go into the pure shopping experience.
And I think the local piece of this is really a huge advantage for them, because, as e-commerce cools, they've got this local online to offline shopping experience that I think has been pretty well established, that will keep people advertising there and keep people coming there.
So another anecdote, Amazon search has gotten so bad that when I know I want something at Amazon, I go to Google and search for it on Google to get to the page.
Amazon.com.
I just type Amazon in the product, and then I get to the page, and it's much better than Amazon search. I mean, Amazon is, I don't know how they've gotten so bad, but their search function is really terrible.
Yeah, and that's the same with
John Henshaw highlighted that several months ago in a tweet that he'd actually built his own third-party client using the Amazon Search API or something that he is now using instead of the actual Amazon search experience.
As his personal search engine.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you're doing the same thing, Mike. You're just using Google instead of building your own app. So
that's the Reddit. Yes. That's the Reddit hack that we were talking about for Google previously.
Right. It's true.
So that brings us to the end of another exciting and hopefully interesting episode for you. We still have a little bit of time left on our digital agency survey, so please take that survey if you're part of a digital agency and have yet to take it. It's going to be closing at the end of the week, and then we'll be analyzing the results and sharing them.
Don't forget to mention the huge reward, the $5 gift certificate that we are giving if you do complete the survey.
And in all seriousness, the very significant discounts to a number of prominent SaaS providers, including Whitespark, Planoly, Sendable, a lot of names that you've heard of, CallRail, Leadferno. It's a really, really great list of SaaS companies that have offered discounts to folks who complete the survey. So yes, if you're an agency, and depending on when you're listening to this podcast, we're going to close the survey Friday, July 29th at the end of the day, Pacific time. So please try to get your answers in before then.
Great. All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.